session on carbon farming. My name is Hanna Winkler, and I'm Policy Officer on Climate Change and Biodiversity at IFOAM Europe, and I have the pleasure to be guiding you through this session today. With me, I'm having an excellent panel with a variety of expertise in carbon farming. But before we hear from them, let's look a bit into why we're discussing this topic today. Carbon farming is a term which is not very clearly defined. Some refer to it as farming practices that increase carbon sequestration in soil, so to store CO2 from the atmosphere and soils. But others also include emissions reduction, so management practices that reduce emissions, for example, from livestock farming in the definition. In any case, it's a very important and current topic. You might have heard the figure that 11% of EU's agricultural emissions are stemming from agriculture. And in the last decade, those emissions have actually not been reduced. So agricultural emissions are stable since 2010, basically. And also when we look at soils, so cropland and grassland, which actually have a big potential to store carbon, we see that in the EU they are actually net emitters of CO2 and they are not a net sink. The European Court of Auditor has released a report where they looked into climate action and the CAP, and their findings were that the previous CAP did not deliver on climate action in agriculture. So their findings in the report were that the CAP has provided little or no support to effective measures to reduce emissions or to increase carbon content in soils. So we see that the CAP has not really been an accelerator on climate action in agriculture, but at the same time there's a clear need to act. So there are a lot of new carbon farming initiatives that are being set up within or outside of the supply chain. And there's also an increasing pressure on delivering targets for companies. So we see climate neutral labels for products or companies on the rise, often also because it's a marketing opportunity. But the situation around carbon certificates is often referred to as the Wild West because there is a lack of regulation and transparency. The European Commission has been trying to tackle this. They've published a proposal on a certification framework for carbon removals, so with the aim to establish an EU certification for carbon removals and carbon farming, and so to have standards for certificates to increase carbon sequestration and to also remunerate farmers and land managers for their activities. Increased soil carbon sequestration is a proven benefit of organic farming. So how do we incentivize farmers to increase carbon sequestration? How do we remunerate them for the benefits and services they're delivering? But also how do we make sure that organic farmers who are already contributing to climate mitigation and climate adaptation are rewarded and that they don't face a disadvantage for being first movers? These and many more questions we are hoping to address in this panel, for which I'm glad to be joined with Adrian Steele, Organic Sector Development Advisor at Soil Association and an organic farmer himself, Batalla, who is board member at Remedia, a scientific network focused on climate change mitigation in the agroforestry sector, and Fiona Marty, who is European Affairs Officer at FNAB, the French Organic Farmer Federation. We will hopefully have plenty of time for your questions later, but in the beginning I would like to give the floor to Ina to tell us a bit about what kind of aspects are important when we're talking about carbon farming, what kind of quality criteria there are when we talk about carbon farming and carbon certificates. So over to you, Ina.
Thank you, Hanna, for the introduction, and thank you also for the organizers to invite me to the panel today, and also to Carolina from the University of Córdoba, that she also is involved in Remedia, as she wants, that's a German name to be in this session. Well, as you know, last November, almost 1 year ago, the Commission proposed this certification of carbon removals as part of the Green The document is very generic, but it is presented as a new business model for agriculture actors, the carbon farming, that in Spanish we sometimes say agricultura del carbono, and we have to think that we are not exactly talking about cultivate carbon, we talk about sequestrate carbon and remove from the atmosphere. So why this new business model would be attractive for the organic sector? Well, organic farming has a high potential for this possible carbon market in comparison with conventional farming, and correlates quite well with this nature-based solution that the Commission proposed, for example, in terms of soil carbon or agroforestry. I would like to make some considerations today, especially for those more interested, the farmers, that also we have discussed this in the previous panel downstairs. This is my objective today, like putting the table some questions that I think we can start later. The first point is that in a voluntary carbon market, the aim is to absorb additional CO2 from the atmosphere, and the result should be a reduction of the greenhouse gas emission and not offsetting emission from other sectors. The Commission proposal establishes 4 criteria: equality, quantification, additionality, long-term storage, and sustainability. So I would like to go into detail one by one. The first one, quantification. How we can quantify the carbon that we can remove? Are we going to use mathematical models? So in that case, we also need to take into account that the models have uncertainties, as also Rafael suggested this morning. Especially when you model carbon, and you have to take into account that carbon dynamics are very different and depends on the agricultural practice, depends on life of soils. If we don't use models, we can direct measure in fields. So in this case, who is going to pay for these measures? The one who sells the carbon. So in this case, we should think that we have to consider a training fund for the farmers and also a monitoring system to monitor the carbon through time. It is important also to take into account that the carbon measure it is not the same that the one to be sold. So it's necessary to also keep like a buffer of the carbon measure. So the quantification needs to be precise and affordable. Otherwise, it is not possible to certify carbon. The second criteria is additionality. If removals are not additional, why will we pay for them? I mentioned it before. If removal offset emissions somewhere else, there are no additional removals. So at the end, we have an increase of greenhouse gas emissions. So it is for this reason that any voluntary market needs to consider a baseline from where we are going to measure. A possible carbon market may imply take carbon out from national inventories and allow private sector to compensate its emission instead of reduction emissions. Also, in some CAP strategic plans, there are some eco-schemes related to carbon farming. So, any voluntary carbon market needs to go over these eco-schemes. There is, I think, a high risk of no additional removals, of thinking on agriculture sector. The third criteria is the permanence. Not permanent removals are not very useful. There is unclear permanent requirements. Further, in a context of climate change and vulnerability conditions, it is necessary to ensure that carbon. What will happen, for example, if there is a fire? And what happens with that carbon that is sequestered? Who is going to pay for the loss of the carbon sequestration? So in this case, the one who buys the carbon needs to be sure that the carbon will be in a long term. So we have to consider a new actor, insurance companies, and take also the account the costs for those who are going to sell, that are the farmers. The permanence also depends on many factors. One of them is the dynamic of the 4 carbon pools that in the IPCC are living biomass, litter, soil, and wood product. Sometimes we only think in soils, but in organic production, the dynamic of carbon in soils differ from conventional. Also, soils are different with different climate conditions, and the carbon dynamics are different between them. So, thinking in this permanence, I have also a question that what happens when the units expire, when the contract expires? How is the storage demonstrated to be permanent in the soils? And the last criteria is sustainability, the broader impacts of removal activities. It is necessary, and we have been talking about this during these 2 days, an integrated approach. We cannot fund carbon removals if they, for example, have terrible impacts on biodiversity. For example, in the case of biochar, there are no evidence on the impact that biochar could have in the soil's health. So I don't want to be pessimistic, but I think that in this new business model there are some points that we need to consider. And all that glitter is not gold. So we have a lot of expectation in the agriculture sector related to this carbon farming, but we should consider the different costs I have mentioned, the price of the carbon nowadays in the markets, and compare the net benefit with another fund opportunities, as for example the equity schemes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Inma, for pointing out important points that we should consider and when talking about carbon farming. Adrian, I would like to hand the word over to you. You've been farming organically for 30 years in England, so I would like to hear from you, what does carbon farming mean for you as a farmer? Which impact does it have on you, on potentially the decisions you are taking on your farm?
Great, well thank you very much for inviting me to speak here today. I'm certainly an interloper because I'm now not a member of the European Union, so what I'm speaking about is going to be my experience in England, which may not be directly relevant in terms of the detail of the schemes that are being developed around carbon and green finance, but I think the issues that we're facing in England are going to be issues that we are on international and will be very much pertinent to the development of this area of potential opportunity for farmers in the European Union. So I'm in a very lucky position in the sense that I'm an organic farmer. I've been farming organically for over 30 years now. And I've been in the fortunate position to be able to work with the Soil Association, which is a large organisation in England and the UK which leads on organic policy and certification. And I'm able to, I'm given the job of working with our government to look at how we can move forward from post-EU agricultural policy and also in this area of green finance. And I'm able to bring some practical perspective to bear in policy discussions. This is basically what we're going to be doing now, is actually looking at this area for me as a businessman, as a farmer, as an organic farmer, and how I feel I might be able to take advantage or not of this developing area. So, the most important thing for organic farmers is resilience. I mean, we know that the system is designed to be resilient, multifaceted, everything should strengthen everything else in your system. In a sense, relying on external funding and so on is important, but fundamentally you need to keep hold of the basic vision that you have for resilience in your farming system. In the face of extreme climate change conditions that we're experiencing, that's something which has to be borne in mind. You also have to really consider your routes to market and consider your best options and view these opportunities in that context. So, organic certification, what does it give you? Well, it gives you access to value-added markets, and the choice is yours which markets you go to. It gives you access in England now for public payments for public goods, so the public externalities that previously were being absorbed by the marketplace, in theory the government is now taking that up. But the government in England has determined not to include carbon as one of those products, one of those public goods is being delivered. That is because there's already an emerging marketplace around carbon, The train has kind of left the station because international commitments have been made around net zero through supply chains, international obligations and so on. And also in its way biodiversity commitments also. So the third opportunity for organic farmers is this green finance. I'm going to lump it together: carbon, biodiversity, water, potential cheaper bank loans, potential supply chain opportunities. The first thing you're going to have to do, which is something which organic farmers may not necessarily want to do, is to actually benchmark and baseline your metrics. The key battleground in all of this is going to be the structure of the marketplace. Who sets the rules? Who determines the metrics? Is it going to be a keyword product? Is it going to be over an area of ground? The metrics can, if they're not wrong, the architecture is wrong, are going to really be bad for us, but they should be good. So we've got to be at a seat at the table. So it's very important that IFOAM and organisations and associations are there when standards are being set and the architecture of these schemes is being developed. So we already are engaged with soil associations in several markets which are not agricultural specifically. But our baseline tool we've developed is called Soil Association Exchange. It's available to non-organic and organic farmers. It's an audit process that includes the farm carbon cutting toolkit. So that's the carbon bit. It also analyses soil, biodiversity, and so on. It's an up-and-running scheme. It's being supported by financial institutions who also need to understand who they're lending to, and it's becoming almost a prerequisite now of getting into any form of green finance opportunity. I'm not going to go into details because I think we can talk about in Q&A later. So the first one is Woodland Carbon Code, which is in relation to forestry and woodland. The second one is peatland. Peatland is something which has been very badly abused in the UK and possibly through Europe as well. And then wild carbon. This is a controversial area about rewetting wetlands, about the sort of concept of rewilding, introducing rare breeds, native breeds back into landscapes and being farmed for cereals because of the incentives under the CAP. What we're looking towards is trying to create a whole farm audit for farmers to look at all the opportunities condensed so that you understand where you are, what opportunities you might have, and you can benefit from your certification and be part of a wider movement. So the areas which are being examined, I suppose you might say, in relation to agriculture, soil carbon, emissions, sequestration, water quality, biodiversity net gain, what role we can play in offsetting the loss of habitats when developers create new industrial sites or residential developments, and then also project finance. And I think project finance is probably one of the more interesting areas for organic farmers. We already are diversified to diversify further, same as agroforestry, to look at habitat creation, to reinforce the resilience of your farming system. That finance can be made more available, more cheaply, through accessing these new markets. The complexity, well, there's a lot of complexity. It's a maze, basically. It's uncoordinated, initiatives are coming from all quarters. The problems that we're facing, or will be facing with the organic sector, is double funding. If we get funding for organic farming specifically under the cap, what is that funding actually for? What are you delivering in that specific funding? If you can't prove that it's not carbon or not biodiversity, so you're going to struggle to get an institution to invest in your farm to deliver those on the basis that you're already getting it from the CAP. It's already something you're being paid for. Why would we pay for that twice? The other thing is that we've done a lot of work on looking at soil carbon sequestration. And if you take samples under a hedgerow, for instance, that will give you an indication about the maximum level of carbon you can probably get in your soil. And we're finding organic farms are getting quite close to that. So if you're going to go into a scheme which is like sequestering carbon in your soil, there's going to be a plateau at some point where you're not going to be able to deliver additional gains. What you are going to be able to do is avoid any reduction, but you're going to struggle to consistently year in, year out deliver gain. And the other thing is there's natural variation. You know, the soil breathes, it's alive. You know, that's one great bonus about modern science. You are looking at soil now as a live thing, not just a substrate that drenching, you know, fertilizer, you know, pesticides. It's actually a real living thing, and that means that you're going to get variability in that. And that was actually a key reason why the UK government didn't take carbon up as a benchmark. And then we've already spoken about market integrity, the offsetting, kind of banana skin you slip on. You give away your carbon effectively to an organisation that isn't playing fair, and it's just simply using you as a stooge to carry on doing its normal business. And then finally, there's the risk of delivery, which I mentioned, permanence, can things be captured forever? What happens if there's a fire? What happens if your habitat creation scheme goes badly wrong for circumstances you couldn't control? And a key driver around that is going to be the insurance market, which again is mentioned. And I think that's an area where, on the positive side, organic farming, because we're inspected, regulated, annually, we're under far greater oversight. So if you're going to lend money or take a risk, it's going to be much reduced if you're applying that, if you're a financial institution, into certified organic land. And I do believe that's a real opportunity that we have. No other land area is so heavily regulated and inspected as the organic sector. And that has to be a strength. When you're talking about money, people don't give it away. You know, they want to have some security, they want to have risk reduction. In the Q&A, I can give examples of where carbon taken alone as a metric of progress in agricultural systems can lead to some really, really bad outcomes in supply chains. And the final point I really wanted to make was about supply chains, because a lot of companies are signing up to net zero commitments, including Scope 3, and Scope 3 obviously is their supply chains. Have they factored in the cost of cleaning that supply chain up in the price they're going to charge consumers in the shops? If not, where's that margin going to come from? Is it going to be pushed down into you, the farmer, extra things you have to do on farm with actually no reward, just simply to have your opportunity to be on the shelf of that particular supermarket chain? So you've got to think very hard about where the balance of power lies in the supply chain, what commitments have been made within that supply chain around Scope 3, and also have they been counted with wide ESG metrics around diversity, biodiversity, water quality, maybe some sort of social, the aspect of agroecology, the social dimension around that. I think organic farmers do need to really keep hold of that social dimension of fairness, which are some of the key principles of IFOAM. So it is a lens. We're trying to navigate our way through that. And if there's anything we can help you with in terms of what's happening in England, then ask some questions, and we need to talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Adrian. I would like to give the floor to Fiona. At FNAB, we've developed a tool, a climate assessment tool. It would be great if you could talk us a bit through it. Thank you, Fiona.
Thank you, Hanna. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here with you. Well, I'm quite happy to have the opportunity to present the tool that we have developed, but maybe I can start with a short presentation of FNAB. Yes, sorry. So FNAB is the French organic farming organization in France. So we are the only organic farmers organization. At national level, we do mostly advocacy work, and at regional and more local level, we have staff to help farmers and to make the advisory work, let's say. I explain this because it might be interesting to see how we have developed and implemented the tool at local level. So as I have mentioned, we have developed this tool, which we call the Agri-Climate Change tool. The main reason why we have developed it is twofold. First, we had internal interest from our farmers, because at that time we were developing FNAB organic brand, let's say, going beyond the EU logo and the organic regulation. And in this initiative, we wanted to have a special focus on climate, on biodiversity, on animal welfare, and so on. So that's why we have really internal interest from our members to develop this tool. And there is also a lot of external pressure, let's say, from the conventional sector, but also from the French Ministry of Agriculture, which is really pushing for a French carbon certificate, which is called Label Bas Carbone, so low carbon certification. And this scheme is mostly designed for conventional farms, and it has been developed in diverse production sectors, such as beef, such as orchard, almonds, and so on, but always only based on conventional farms and conventional data that has been gathered for years. And then, as organic farmers, we feel really outside of the scope, and the farming practices are just not taken into account in these schemes. That's why we feel that there was a need to develop our own data and to work them with scientists in order to have really a strong model, because the two previous speakers talked about the models and the importance of the metrics and so on. So we think that we should, as organic movement, put our practices, our methods into those conventional schemes in order to be more represented and to take benefit of those schemes. So this is mostly why we developed this tool. So sorry for the design. The slide is usually in French. I presented it in English and put the squares on. So sorry for the bad design. But the objective of this tool is it's really diverse, and both the farmers, but also the national level, will benefit from the outcomes of this tool. When we look at the farm, the tool aims at make diagnosis of the farm practices and evaluate the climate impact of the farm and of each practices of the farm. So with this diagnosis, then the farmers know what it does and what is the impact on climate change. And there is also an action plan that he can build with the advisor at local level in order to improve his or her practices regarding climate. This is also, within our local groups, there is also the advantage when we work together, when the farmers work together with the advisors, then they can move on together, and this group energy is really big in order to move forward towards best practices. And finally, for the whole organic movement and for FNAB at national level, with this tool we will gather and collect many data on farming practices and their impact on climate change, with a special focus on organic. And this is very important because with those data we will be able to feed scientists and the models developed by the conventional schemes and Label Bas Carbone, which I mentioned earlier. So these are the objective of this tool, and we hope that we will all benefit from it, from the farm to the whole farmer organization at national level. Well, again, maybe I can go quick on that, but here I have presented all the benefits from it. So from the farmer which gets its diagnosis, then on top of that, because for the practices which do not have an impact only on climate, but also on biodiversity or water, as you mentioned. Then we also have a kind of a qualitative questionnaire in order to assess how the practices impact on that. As I mentioned, the farmers then get the result in the action plan, and we at national level we get the results of the climate performance of organic in general, and we hope that in the future we will build a really detailed database on the climate performance of organic farms in France. Yes, here again maybe some indicators we are focusing on in this tool and at the farm. So just to give you some examples, we measure direct and indirect emissions and direct and indirect consumption of energy. Then there is also the measurement, the calculation of what gas are most emitted by the farm. Is it, for example, methane in bovine sector, for example, but for other production it can be other gases. As I mentioned, we also focus on other indicators such as water consumption, tillage, or forestry. We also get a special focus on ammonia, as I mentioned, because it is a great pollutant, so that's why we put a special focus on that. And we also estimate the capacity of carbon sequestration of the farm and so on. And all the greenhouse gas emissions are converted into CO2 equivalent per hectare. This is the metric that we've chosen. And yes, we started the whole project in 2021. And then this year we started first with the diagnosis on the farms, and we hope that as from next year we will have some data, and then with the years going on we will have more and more data in order to feed the national database. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Fiona, for presenting the work you're doing at FNAB. Both of you, Adrian and Fiona, you've talked about carbon certification schemes that are already existing in your respective countries. Are there any learnings we can draw from it, or which impact does it have on organic farmers? We talked a bit about it, but maybe Adrian, you want to talk a bit about the situation in the UK? So, which impact does it have on organic farmers, the current certification schemes?
Thank you. Yes, I think it's too early to tell at this stage whether the organic sector is going to come out with greater advantages than the best in class in the conventional sector. I think that the monitoring is there. The farm carbon cutting toolkit is very similar to what Fiona's described. The S exchange audits are there. One of these sort of negative outcomes we've experienced so far is in supply chain initiatives, where organic farmers have been given mandatory obligations to report, and other members of bits and crops have self-selected the best people have come in and given their metrics, and so organic farming isn't coming out that well in the dairy sector. I think it's a bit like, when in our farming press at harvest time, the people who contribute for magazines always have 15 tonnes a hectare of the best wheat ever. When actually data comes in around the harvest that year, the average yield was 48 tonnes. So I think it's kind of unfair at the moment that those comparisons are being made with, in a sense, the best in class in the conventional sector. In terms of the scheme's opportunities, then yes, obviously systems around rewilding, generally speaking, are organically certified. Clearly some beneficiaries in that sense, with very good metrics behind that. In terms of woodlands, we're really hopeful to try and integrate the sort of opportunities around sequestration and also absorption of carbon in sort of high integrity organic systems in between permanent pasture and opportunities around agroforestry to be developed, particularly silver pasture. I think also the opportunities around permaculture have increased with the development of precision steering on tractors. It's very much easier now to intercrop, and those are areas where we can combine the best of organic farming rotational practice with a good infrastructure which can deliver returns from carbon, as well as delivering biodiversity gains. So without going into huge detail about what actually is what these schemes involve, and probably not really that exciting point, so it's not relevant to European Union, I will hand over to you.
Thanks, Adrian, and also for the important reminder that the metrics is crucial in reflecting the objectives that we want to achieve. Fiona, is there anything you want to add from the French perspective on label bas carbone?
Well, indeed, I already talked a bit of label bas carbone. Actually, two things. First, those kinds of schemes, we see it with label bas carbone, but also on another topic like PEF in France, we see that all those schemes, they are not tailored for organic because they mostly reward the transition. And for the farmers who are already above this transition, those schemes are really unadapted. So that's mostly why with the current schemes, the organic farmers are totally out and they cannot really take benefit from it. So that's why we developed the tool, and we hope that in the future we can improve those schemes in order to better have the organic farmers be able to get into those schemes. At the moment, this label bas carbone is developing, but there are 6 schemes which are developed under this whole label bas carbone. But the ministry is very pushy in order to have it really being developed for all sectors and within most of the French conventional farms. But we see that it goes very slow and that farmers at the moment are not so keen on going into it. So when I talk about that, it's more the conventional farmers, and when we look at the organic farmers, they are really out of the scope now. So for the moment, it's not so attractive, but we are trying to improve the system. We've made that choice of improving the 6 current schemes that are on the table, and we do not plan to develop our own organic scheme because, for the moment, it doesn't seem to be the best option for us. But this is how we're dealing with it at the moment.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, interesting to hear that the first mover issue is also is a problem in many of the schemes that are out there at the moment. Maybe a question to you, Imma. Carbon farming and carbon certification mainly looks at carbon, but we know that agriculture and land management has an impact on a variety of factors, so soil health, water use and quality. How can we ensure that we don't overlook those factors and that we opt for solutions that are actually contributing in a holistic way, which lies at the very heart of organic farming?
Thank you. It's an ambitious question as well as the ambitious solution for all the impacts that agriculture has for many ways. For example, now we are focused on carbon and also what is happening in the agri-schemes in the last CAP. But there are also another emissions that we need to take into account and also to put in debate, like methane emission, nitrate oxide emission, another CO2 emission from transportation from many of the inputs that came in our farms nowadays, somewhere in the place. So it's very difficult to have an integrated vision, but I think that 10 years ago, maybe we we didn't think on that. So I think that we cannot fight every battle, but I think that we can afford somehow that carbon sequestration is important, but also the important thing is that we need to reduce emissions in our carbon activities. So depends in which.
So you see a change or in thinking or the way.
For example, and this is something related to what they have been speaking. 10 years ago, related to carbon labeling in organic sector was not possible. Because the carbon footprint indicator measures efficiency, so there was no possibility to talk about carbon labeling if we compare to conventional. Now that the carbon sequestration enters in the debate, there are more options to carbon farming to have in place in the markets on carbon labeling, but so somehow we have some progress and we have been taking into account a lot of things, no? Is the permission also carbon sequestration.
Okay, that's a good optimistic view. Adrian, you want to add to it?
Yes, I think it's a question. In England, it was frustrating because the drivers that came down from the central government were around climate-related financial disclosures, which all the big companies had to have audits. That came into force before the secondary nature-related financial disclosures came into legislation. I think that once that comes in, it will balance the imbalances that we saw from carbon being taken as a unique metric when supply chains are looking at their joint footprints. So I think in terms of sort of policy, in terms of the European Union, it's very important that biodiversity is addressed simultaneously with carbon. Don't let carbon come in first. Because otherwise you're on the back foot.
Yeah, some argue even carbon sequestration is a co-benefit of improving soil health and so on. Fiona, you would like to answer?
Well, I cannot agree more. As I mentioned, in our tool, we try to have biodiversity and also water management in the tool, even though it's not that easy, but we are working on it, and definitely this is something that we must not lose because the co-benefits are really important to take into account. So I totally agree with what Adrian just said.
Okay, thank you. I would like to open the floor now for questions. If there are okay, I will see a couple of questions. Does anyone have a microphone and quotes? Thank you.
Hello. Hello, good morning everybody, and thanks a lot for your presentation. It's been a pleasure to listen to you. Well, it's a big opportunity for the organic market to get more resilience with our agricultural communities, but also it's a special or additional income for the farmers. And there is a key point that I think that we have to talk about a little bit more. That is the additionality. Additionality is a key point because one farmer that is doing their job really well is going to have really difficulties to get this income with the actual regulation. Well, I'm working on the carbon market, and we are working very hard to push to the government, to the regulation, to think about the inspirational work that these kind of farmers did in the past, and they are not going to open the carbon market to these farmers. What do you think that could be a good possibility or additional works or conversations with the governments to push in that direction? Because they did it really well, and now the question is, I did a really good job in my farm, and now I'm not going to have to get an additional income. And with the actual situation of the market, and where everybody are fighting every day to sell their products, this income, it could be really important for some of them, and for the families and the companies. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your question. Any one of you would like to take the question on additionality and first comment?
well, yeah, I mean, I said it before. I mean, additionally, when you, for example, farmers see this as a new business model, but it's, I mean, there are many concerns. First, they have to understand what a carbon market is, because we are not talking about carbon labeling in this case. So, and nowadays in Spain, carbon is accounted in the national inventory. So every carbon that you sell, and it needs to be first over these inventories or take off from the inventory. So at national level, we will have less carbon reported. And so maybe, and it could be a possibility, and Professor Sanoli told us this morning an example of Nestlé. So maybe if there are some people who want to invest and maybe they can contribute for farmers instead of conservation, biodiversity. So, I mean, maybe there are many options for incomes with that we will have more opportunity instead of the carbon markets, as carbon markets are. That is a new business model for agriculture. So it's a new thinking model. So, I mean, there are many options probably on other interesting options instead of only measured carbon.
Okay, thank you, Emma. Anyone who wants to add?
Well, it could be indeed a good opportunity for farmers, like an income opportunity, but the case in France at the moment is really that organic farmers, with the practices, they are out of the existing schemes, so they cannot pretend to get those incomes. That's why we are working in order to improve the schemes and to have the possibility for organic farmers to go and get those additional incomes.
Thank you, Fiona. Are there any other questions? Okay, Jan, please.
Yeah. Thank you very much. I have two questions. One to the contribution of Fiona. I think in many member states or many of our organizations are happening similar approaches. So, is there a need and a chance for a collaborative approach so that we gather these investments in developing tools and methods, calculation schemes, etc., and collecting data to provide, to improve the conventional databases? So this is the first question. Second question is what I observe in the political debate is going further with this internal volunteer carbon certificate market. So this is one option. The other option would be to include the agricultural and food sector into the emission trade system. So doing the opposite. So giving out emission certificates to the operators and then reduce the amount of emissions, like what is done for the energy sector, for example. So there are different scenarios where they discuss what kind of impact would have this policy. Is it quicker or is it even more dangerous? Do you have an opinion on that?
Very big questions. Fiona, you want to start?
Well, definitely, we are keen on having contacts and exchanges with other farmer organizations within IFOAM. So yes, it is really much welcome. We can definitely exchange about our respective tools, and maybe make also develop something at EU level to convince the EU Commission that organic has to take its part in this carbon certification. What shall I take the floor to?
The question about agriculture, like establishment of an ETS for agriculture. Anyone would like to take this question? It's a tricky one, but
just going back to the first question, sorry, I think yes, the more collaboration and learnings that we've got from everybody who's in this race effectively will be time well spent. I think that's a really good idea to start what's been found out. Like, there's a lot of research still needs to be done, and markets are moving faster really than the reality, I would say. And so they need to be grounded in something pretty more solid than it feels like they are at the moment. And credibility in the marketplace is really holding it back. A lot of people are afraid to go into it. Farmers are nervous about entering into something. Financial institutions also. So credibility is key to developing anything along these lines. If they're kind of trading platforms that you're talking about without credibility, great. If they're structured in a way which doesn't stack up for long-term gain for everybody, then I think we need to be in the room when that structure's being developed. I can't say I can comment particularly on the industrial sector to know what the learnings are from that.
Thank you. Then I will take the next question. Anyone has the microphone?
So I'm Carlos Koister from Trident again. I have a question for Adrian Steele. Because I was wondering if you have any data or if you can give an indicated value of the amount of carbon and then the value of the carbon stored at a typical UK farm coming from your research, maybe per hectare. I mean, is it like 50 euros a hectare or is it 10,000?
I'm sorry, I don't have those metrics. I can come back to you with some proper detail. I wouldn't want to give out a figure which isn't accurate now. I think that when you're saying per hectare, this is sort of agricultural, like crop land.
Yes, correct. Yeah.
I think it's the complexity of different land types and soil structure, different tillage systems. There's so many variables in that. You have to have an audit really for your own farm to understand what your potential is. There is a marketplace for carbon, but it's the forestry marketplace, and I couldn't give you hard and fast figures. I'm sorry to select you on that.
Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Thanks for bringing the microphone to me.
Well, thank you very much. I'm sorry. You were next.
Yeah, we have still time for 2 more questions. It's both of you can speak.
This is very interesting. I represent the Andalusian government and the agricultural family. No, I really believe it is the way of getting extra money paid to farmers. But as the way I see it now, it's pretty experimental. As he said, there are no clear figures of how much is the revenue for farmers. Therefore, can you foresee any time in the next few years in which we will have a steady system which is easy to manage for farmers and to have a certainty in order to get into the system? Thank you.
I'm afraid to say that most money that's going to be made out of this, people are in the trading platforms, they've been commissioned every transaction. There's a real race to generate a trading platform for this exchange. As to who the beneficiaries will be long term, the jury is still out on that. In theory, we should be beneficiaries because it's going to mitigate climate change, and that's the imperative. But I think there's a lot of competing platforms, competing visions about how these markets are going to operate, and it's very, very difficult at this stage. Maybe in a year's time, when we have the next conference, we'll have some more information about that. But it's still, some people talk about Wild West, and some of these marketplaces on the voluntary side of it. But I think the key pressure is going to be, again back to some earlier questions, it's just about the resiliency of the system. If generating something which is going to give you a carbon benefit is also a benefit to your farming system, then that's something you can go ahead and do. If that's going to future-proof your business, if you're suffering from extreme drought, a more permanent crop cover is going to be maybe a way of mitigating the impact of tillage, for instance. So I think that it's really going to be a question of trying to make this work for you, not relying on it as some form of magic. So I think it's going to come along and to make up for other shortfalls. I feel that's why I'm going to look at it at this stage.
and I think in the EU it also depends a bit on how the negotiations on this carbon removal certification framework are going. Where there's a proposal that's now in the European Parliament and so on. So it also depends a bit on how long this will take. I would say. Fiona, you want to add to the question as well? Or otherwise,
regarding the timeline, I guess for organic farmers it can take long before those schemes are efficient for them. To give you an example, at the moment in France we have an overall, I think it's 4,000 kind of projects, so we get financed through this label by carbon, but among these 4,000, well, most of them are in agroforestry. So not agriculture, and agriculture represents only like 100 of the project. So it takes long even for the conventional farmer when the schemes are designed for the conventional farmer. So I guess before it works for organic, we still need more time, and I doubt that next time for the next DOC we will have an answer to that.
Okay. Yeah, so you already have the microphone, go ahead.
Adrian. I come from the old school, and I would like to remind even my colleagues who have been with us with IFOAM over 20 years that there was an advisor of Kofi Annan, the United Nations General Secretary. I remember very well his name was Dr. Timijevic from Ljubljana. He was, a guru on the climate change, and we talked about, quantifying, because it's very interesting. If I remember very well, we worked out a formula where about 500 tons of cellulose would contribute towards the production of 600 tons of oxygen, where as humans we need every day to take about 620 grams of oxygen. But as you mentioned very well, the issue of agroforestry, for example, I remember very well that there was evidence that the ficus, the rubber plant tree, is the best performance, for the carbon sequestration. And I remember very well, there was a project where we looked at this issue of carbon farming from a global perspective, because we believe that we can sequestrate carbon more in the ocean. If we were to invest issuing, let's say, green bonds on the fertilization of plankton, actually to get, the sequestration of carbon, and that would contribute a lot. Now, another issue which you have touched is, the livestock. And you mentioned the word methane gas. In Malta, the university, we're working together on the feeding of seaweed, Posidonia, to mix it with forage, where it induces the digestion instead of, emitting at 5% gas. Actually, that would be working away in the digestive tract, which contributes, to more carbohydrates instead of gas. And I think that those who are doing research, it's worth to work together. I mean, I can give you the name of the professor who has been with us. I know what he's doing because he is our President Emeritus of the Malta Organic Agriculture Movement. And another project is the slaughtering. Slaughtering where we can reduce as well the emissions. And the slaughtering house, we found out that if we were to use the feather, of the broilers, actually the fiber can be mixed with recycled construction waste in the construction industry. And if I remember very well, I'm recalling on my memory, it's 1 to 100 percentage, 1 kilo for 100 recycled bricks. And actually we will be reducing. And another thing, talking about this watering, another option is, and it's food for thought, we're running out of phosphates. You know that phosphate is becoming illogical. And we can use, even from the leftovers, the legs, the heads of the broilers, actually to produce phosphates. Now the issue is to quantify it, but this is a political. I mean, we do our part. Now the politicians will give them food for thought and they can work on it. So,
we have the permission apparently for one last question, so I'll take your question, then if you want to reply or comment. I think it was more of a comment, but if you want to react then to the comment just made, we can do it all together. Please go ahead.
My name is Sophie Pagnon from Veritas, or Organic Supermarkets. I wanted to know if we have some data between measuring the carbon impact between the three kinds of agriculture: the conventional within a carbon program, and the organic. Is there any information about the different impacts in terms of carbon?
Is there one of you?
On scientist literature, there are many studies mainly focused on life cycle assessment, comparing different systems. So, I mean, there are studies comparing different, usually conventional versus organic, not with mitigation or this kind of measures, but I mean, there are. But sometimes results for organic, as I said before, how the system is prepared are not very positive for organic in terms of efficient emissions. Carbon footprint of organic production usually sometimes is higher than a conventional one. So that's why when you introduce carbon sequestration, they implement this change.
Okay, I think we have to come to an end. We could still continue this for a long time, but I think we have the chance in the break or over lunch later. I thank you very much for being here and joining into the session. And yeah, have a great session. Thank you.